So inshallah, we'll open up for Q&A. For those who want to ask verbally, you can raise your hand. Inshallah, Brother Imran Dam, who's the admin, he will unmute you and you can ask your question. If anybody would like to ask a question, and they can post it here in the chat box. So that's open for your questions, inshallah. I would like to also kind of draw attention that please ask questions that are related to this subject. We know that there's a lot of struggling around the world, and we talk about Palestine and Syria and all those things, and there are genuinely very important subjects, and we talk about it often. But this is we want to focus on the African American community. So anything related to this subject, inshallah, you can go ahead and ask those questions. Barakallahu feekum. Let me see if we have someone here.
It looks like I see some people are raising their hand. I see Brother Zaki first, and then Sister Vila, and then Sister Vila.
Quiet. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Darren.
Walaikum salam.
Dr. Khalil, jazakumullah khair. This is very timely. I want to ask you how we can maintain a relationship with police departments. As you know, masajid have certain relationship they maintain with police department, but at the same time, making sure we are present to speak and support justice and policing reform, prison reform.
Yeah, Brother Darren, did you want to speak to that?
No, please, you can go, please. Yeah, please.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Zaki. Very good question. I can say two things quickly. I have some experience in this area, alhamdulillah. One, every single masjid in every single city needs to have a strong relationship with their local police department. And what you need to do is contact the what's called the office of every police department in every city has an office of what's community affairs or community relations or something of that nature. That's the first step. That's not the goal. Okay, that's entry into the front gate. Okay, well, your ultimate goal should be, this happens through the communal relations door though, right? So first you want to find out who the chief of community relations is or who the director is, invite them to the masjid, have a talk, sit down, talk with them, and then you need to tell them, this is what we like to, we have, 5 masjids in our city, we have 10 masjids in our city, we have 3 masjids in our city. We'd like to establish a citizens commission that will comprise, 2, 3, 7, 11 members from our community to have meetings with the chief of police of the city or with the commissioner, the police commissioner of the city on some kind of basis to talk about building relationship with the community and to support communal policing. What you want is a council of folks to meet with the chief of police or the police commissioner if it's in a large city on a regular basis. Now, here's the problem. You got to get the right people to sit at the table. You can't get people that I've been in, I can tell you an example of something that happened very similarly where a few people at the table wanted seats at the table so they could have access to, like, they could make personal requests, free parking spaces, a Jummah, so their community members wouldn't get ticketed. That's not the right way to do things, right? You're not there for personal gain. You are there sitting at a table speaking to power. And you have to understand that when you got to have the right kind of people there, and it's best to have people who have experience sitting at such tables, so that effort will be the community at large will receive the benefit. So ultimately, the goal is to establish a council from the community to sit with the chief or the commissioner. Every city works different. To be able to advocate to the community, to go to be a voice for the community to the head of the police. Same thing needs to happen with the city, at the city level, with the mayor's office and things of that nature. That does happen in some cities, but those examples are few and far between. I was a part of the first one in the city of New York that met with the NYPD, for example. And we met with the police commissioner and the chief of police all at the same table on a bi-monthly basis, so every other month. And that was when we had the stop and frisk situation and the New York and the spying on the Muslim community in New York. And so though that model worked, I was there. I was the first one, part of the first cohort. Today, you don't have spying on Muslim communities in New York City. Today, you don't have stop and frisk. That community stuff, that community work paved the way and built the foundation for the destruction of those policies. But that kind of model has to work around the country in local cities, but you got to have a diverse group of folks sitting around the table because they have to command respect when they're sitting with power. If you have a bunch of people there who are afraid of law enforcement, who don't know how to talk properly to people who are there because they're afraid of them or because they want personal gains, then it's a waste of time and it's not going to work. So, and you have to understand that this is a long-term game. You're not going to get any major change in a month or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. You're laying a foundation. It's like Hudaybiyah in the Prophet's time. So I said them, you're gonna work hard, you'll be patient, be a little setback, but long term, you're gonna see, inshallah, the conquest of Mecca. And that's the way everybody at the table has to think, and folks at the table have to meet outside to understand what their agenda is, what the strategy is. It's a major project. You just can't go into a room with major local officials and not have a plan, not have a strategy. So this is something that takes thought, professionalism, strategy, a diverse group of folks, and it's very serious because oftentimes when you're dealing in situations like this, you have one chance to make it happen. And if you squander that chance, many times they won't meet with you again, or they'll keep meeting with you because they know you're stupid and they can play you. Right? They know that you just, they can read through you real quick, especially when you're dealing with law enforcement. They can read people very good. So if your intentions are not sincere, you don't know what you're doing, you're not the right person at that table. We got to have the right people speaking on behalf of our community. And so just because a person wants to do it does not mean they're qualified and they should do it. Like the Prophet ﷺ told one of his sahabas that wanted to represent them in a meeting, he said, the Prophet ﷺ told him, you're too kind. Your heart is too soft. In other words, you're good, but this is not the right work for you, right? Your place is elsewhere. So this is the kind of thing that we need to do, inshallah ta'ala.
The only thing I would add to that, that amazing advice would be that to the extent that, we do a lot of focus on elections, especially national or presidential elections, to the extent that you have folks like district attorneys or sheriffs or whatever, some of these positions are voted upon, right, by the people. And so it makes a lot of sense to be involved one way or another in thinking about who we're voting for or in those campaigns, so that we can make sure that the people, we can also have the people we want on the other side of the table from us as well. I had the pleasure of sitting in on a meeting with the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization who was had a meeting with Rachel Rollins, who's the DA in Boston. And I think that was a function of a lot of the community organizing and electoral organizing that folks of color did to get Rachel Rollins elected in the first place, who would then be a person who would be a willing participant to sit across from us in that meeting.
Next is Sister Villa. And then we have a few online questions.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you so much for your speeches. I was wondering if you could suggest, do you know of any masajid in the US which have been successful and have really made a difference in transforming their communities to a point where Black Muslims felt just as much at home as other communities tend to feel without so much difficulty, so that we could maybe get in touch with them and learn from their best practices and see what we could learn?
Sheikh Khalil, do you want to jump in on that one? I'll just say quickly. This is not my total area expertise, but a person that comes to mind when I think about African American Muslims who came in and transformed communities it would be Imam Zaid Shakir, right? Who I think in a few different places in New Haven, New Haven is a community that I know about for sure, and other places where he did a lot of intentional work to both, find a place for, a masjid, right, in the community, and then simultaneously doing the work, right, to create the conditions for that masjid, and therefore the Muslim community to thrive. And what that really involved, from my understanding, is a lot of work with, folks from the community, whether it was folks who were, doing good things in the community, folks who might not be doing good things in the community, doing detrimental things to the community, a lot of outreach and coordination to essentially, but I don't like the term cleaning up communities, but sort of, creating a community foundation so that masjid and the subsequent Muslim community around it could thrive. But that's just one example that comes to my mind.
Yeah, I would have to say that's absolutely, spot on. Jazakallah khair. I think to mention from the other perspective, in my experience, whether it's in Texas, and Georgia, New York, Jersey, Massachusetts, for that matter, I think it's a work in progress. I think the challenge has been the fact that it hasn't been a priority, and that as an institution, the concessions have been allowances for less, for poorer masjids to have a spot in Ramadan for fundraising. And if there are communal activities, I know one or two cases where, there are, larger, wealthier suburban masjids that partner once a year with an inner city mosque to do, a food drive or clothing drive or something of that nature. But so those relationships are largely looked at as important because the suburban masjid can have sort of access to the inner city through that inner city mosque, right? Instead of going there themselves, they can sort of, go through there and that becomes the value of the relationship. That has to change. So we are work in progress, but I think I don't say that to be critical as much as I say that to say that, that the conditions on the ground have not been one that have been open to the idea that there needs to be a really good discussion about the intrinsic value and the importance of the presence of inner city Muslims, right? And because the value has been on finance and money so much. One of the paradoxes of a mega mosque is that yes, it's big and beautiful, but it's really expensive, and it sucks in all of the resources so that there's nothing left to give outside, right? Donors are fatigued, and it sucks in everything to its own center. So it's hard to have a school. It's hard to have a clinic. It's hard to have a seminary. It's hard to have a hospital. It's hard to have so many other necessary integral functions that you need in a community to establish a real community. And so folks are caught into the idea that the community is a center. Community is not a center. Community is people. People coming together to solve people problems in real humane ways. And so that's the value for sure that the Black American Muslim community emphasize, and that's part of the success from definitely from mid 60s to the mid 90s for 30, almost 40 years. And then with the rise of suburban wealthy mega mosques, the Qibla shifted. The Qibla shifted because the alliances shifted. And so if you've got a suburban mega mosque, you build an alliance with a suburban mega church, and you build an alliance with a suburban mega synagogue. And so your communities are all based in wealth and the production of wealth and the accumulation of wealth. And the concern becomes a suburban middle class concern. And that is a different kind of thinking, and it's a different kind of concern than the concern of the of the inner city. It's a different dynamic in the inner city because people's needs are different. People's plights are more dire. People's access and their encounters, with injustice is very different. So there's a different urgency in the inner city and the working communities, and particularly in the Black communities, than there are in the urban centers where there's a lot more comfort and stuff. And so the relationship has been, a different kind of relationship, but I think now is the time to sort of to put value into the Black American Muslim community and the Black American community so that we can now reform and enhance all of our masajids, but in different ways, right? In different ways, because there's wealth in the Black community, but it looks different.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's wealth in the Black American Muslim community, but it looks different. We have been conditioned to think that wealth is all green, that wealth looks like sheetrock, brand new carpet, air conditioning. That's the way we've been conditioned to see new clothes, right? That's the way we're conditioned to see wealth. But the early Muslims understood Allah showed them a different kind of wealth. The path of the Prophet ﷺ helps us to understand that the gifts of Allah Ta'ala is that he distributes and diversifies his wealth in different ways amongst different people. So if we don't come to know each other, we won't come to be introduced to a different understanding of wealth. And therefore, if we don't see that, how can we value that kind of wealth? And therefore, our relationship with people is just materialistic. It's not based on actual value. It's based on what we can get from somebody. And that's how institutions have been functioning for 25 years in this country, in the American Muslim community, So that has to change.
That's really a great point. But also from another perspective, there's a question here online. Assalamu alaikum. Is there a possibility for a Muslim community to have a networking system that is not ethnically oriented? Most folks in the Black community are in poverty, not because they are uneducated, but because they don't have support to move forward and get good jobs.
I'm still trying to get the question. What was the question in there, though?
So how is there a possibility for a Muslim community to have a networking system that?
Oh, I see what you mean.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good. I think that's a good idea in principle, right? Thinking about what are the the different kinds of privileges and accesses that we have across our community, right, writ large, and thinking about how to make them more accessible to folks who don't, right? So some of us who have access to capital, how do we make that accessible to other folks? Those who have access to relationships with people in power or communities, like how do we make that accessible, right, across the board? So what I hear in the question, and I think it speaks to what I was saying before, it does require some intentionality, right, in thinking about both understanding the types of wealth that are that different communities, to Sheikh Khalil's point, that different communities have different kinds of wealth, right? So to be able to see that wealth exists there, and then going out of our ways to curate opportunities for us to come together, right? And so one way or another, whether that's virtually or otherwise, but I think what I hear is that it requires us to be able to have the foresight to figure out where our different kinds of assets are lying across our communities, and then doing some real work, right, to leverage those for each other, right, and making sure that they're not being concentrated in specific parts of our community, right? So like another way that I could see that happening, for example, is I know that there's a lot of us, like in art, in the sharing community, who know very well, one way or another, how to navigate the college application process, right? That I know for a fact, for like some of our brothers and sisters in the Somali community or other folks in Boston, right, may not have that level of, they're definitely doing well in school, but it would be great to be able to know, like, what does it mean to apply for colleges, for financial aid and this and that? How do I best position myself, right? And so that's another type of way in which we have some kind of capital in our community that we could be sharing with other folks in our community. That's just another type of way. And I'm sure there's 17 other ways we could be, utilizing that same kind of principle.
MashaAllah. Jazakallah khair. There's two more questions that we would like to go to, and we'll close. One is about what are the books that you will both suggest. Inshallah, we'll come to that later. But there's one question that I want to address and to maybe put that to Sheikh Khalil, because that was something that he mentioned very powerfully, where to go back and to see where that wealth is and to work with the urban communities. So the question is, that when you say go back to the urban masjids, does that mean for just alliances with them?
No, more than that. No. I mean,
Question.
we have to, in some ways, our our relationships with our mosque have been similar to our relationships with countries, in the sense of nationalized. This is my mosque, and with that comes a degree of alienation, right? That as if another mosque is not your mosque.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, actively you may not think another mosque is not your mosque, but the point is you may not feel at home or comfortable in a mosque in the inner city. Why is that why is that, right? In the same way, somebody from the inner city might not feel at home or comfortable at a mega mosque, for example, right? That should not be the case. That's what I'm trying to get at. So, our relationships, whether it's any inner city mosque, suburban mosque, mega mosque, tiny corner store mosque, masjid, they're all houses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They all look different. They have different values to them. They all command respect and dignity. So do the people that inhabit those places and take care of those places. What oftentimes tends to be the case is that we instrumentalize our relationships, right? So, we only, we build relationships with mosques when it's strategically in the interest of the masjid to build a relationship with the mosque or to partner up with it. And we may ostracize a masjid too, if things don't go our way. The houses of Allah cannot be politicized, right? This is really, really, really important. We tend to be political people. And by political, I don't mean every Muslim trying to run for office. I mean a power struggle, right? Control. Everybody who runs a masjid wants control. So that paradigm has to change, okay? And so when we think about relationships between, when I talk about going back to the inner city or going back for wherever, what I'm referring to is going back to people that populate the place. There has been neglect of people in different communities and different neighborhoods, even for people who frequent from people who live in a neighborhood to their local mosque, right? Even a local mosque can quite easily alienate the members of their community, right? Because they may want to cater to a different aspect of their community. Do you remember Abasa wa Tawalla? Right, the Prophet the chapter on the Prophet when the Prophet was talking to Walid ibn Mughira, right? Because he knew if he could get Walid, who was the head of the Bani Makhzum clan, the only clan that was a real rival to the Prophet. I mean, if he could get Walid in there, that would be it, right? And Abdullah bin Maktoum said, Ya Rasulullah, I want to hear a little of the Quran, right? Just a little. Abasa, right? The Prophet frowned. You never know where Allah will put the barakah in, right? Just like on your plate, the Prophet said, if you leave a grain of rice untouched, that barakah might be there. That person you alienate, that person you isolate, that person you marginalize, could be a man, could be a woman, could be a new convert, could be somebody curious about Islam. That person who you've turned away, who you've not let in, who you've shut your doors to, either actively or even passively, that could be a loss of barakah, which is why the masjid experiences financial problems, which is why the masjid has a dysfunctional board, which is why the masjid, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All because you don't take care of the people around you. So we have to go back to find out where have we been neglectful of Allah's blessings, okay? That requires building real relationships of trust with people who are part of our own community, but understanding that as part of our community is not just people who come to the masjid, but it's also people who don't come to the masjid, who may not feel comfortable, or they can't afford to come to the masjid. They like to come, but they can't afford to. Or they would like to come, but they want to see that they have some representation there so that it helps them feel comfortable to come. For example, right? They say the board, the board or the people are made up of one group of folks. They don't see anybody like them, so they don't feel comfortable because that's the way they are. Their constitution is. So we have to be embracing of everybody. And until that's the case, now there's one other thing, if I may, is specifically about the inner city. And please understand my point well here. I'm not telling everybody to just quit their jobs, go into the inner city, okay? What I'm saying is that there's a barakah there that as a Muslim community we've neglected. And that is a deviation from the prophetic teaching, right? Abghuni bidu'afaikum, the Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if you want to find me, you find me with the people that have been forgotten. That's the inner city. Those are the impoverished folks that have been neglected. Those are the people like George Floyd, right? And the people like Breonna Taylor, right? Not that everybody who's poor is broken, but certainly Black folks are marginalized, right? Systematically, from a system, that's the case, and there's tons of data and facts to support that. So the Prophet said, if you want to find me with those that are marginalized and weak, they're not weak in themselves. They don't have power because the system weakens them, right? That's the point. So as a Muslim community, the Prophet said, find me there. But we have actively run to power. We have actively run away from there. And we are claiming to be his ummah. So when I say we gotta go back, we need to go back to find the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? And then he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, فَإِنَّمَا تُنْصَرُونَ and وَتُرْزَقُونَ, because you'll be tunsarun, you'll be nusra, you'll be given victory on account of your proximity to those that are weakened and disenfranchised. He said, tunsarun, there'll be nusra. You'll be given victory. Right now, as a community, we are not even in third place, right? In terms of exemplars for the American community to even consider Islam, right? So he says, you'll be victorious in your endeavor. And then he said, وَتُرْزَقُونَ, right? You'll be given rizq. You won't have to fundraising. Since when does the deen of Allah need fundraisers? What, right? When are the masjids, are we so broke we can't hire imams and keep imams? It's because we're not doing things right, right? Turzaqun, you'll be provided for, right? You'll be provided for when you do this. So because we run away from people that look poor, act poor, people who we think are weak, people who think we're lower than us, or think dirtier, it's because of our prejudicial jahiliyyah inside of us, right? It's because of our jahiliyyah, right? We think they're dirty, we don't want to get dirty. We think they're criminals, so we don't want to be victimized. So we close our wallets a little bit, when the brother comes in, the sisters go, no, we can't be like that. We can't. And then me reading Quran and Ramadan and acting like we're pious. We can't do this. It's hypocrisy. So we have to go where the barakah is. That's why Malcolm said the most fertile ground for Islam in this country is the inner city and the Black community. And you'll find that the entire Black community in the US has communally converted to Islam, right? Not every Black person is Muslim, but as a community, Black people have accepted Islam as a way. That's why there's so many Khadijas who are non-Muslim. That's why there's so many Latifas and Aishas and Jamals, who are non-Muslim. Their parents give them Muslim names. That's why there's so many hip hop artists that were Muslim, because Islam has been part of the Black experience. Why? Because in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, the only thing that spoke to the needs of Black people and their rights in this country were the Muslims. That's it, right? But when we became suburbanized and we became sanitized, and deodorized and Santa Clausified, and we started hanging up Christmas trees like suburban as Muslims and talking about, Muslim Halloween and everything of that nature, when we became like this, well, of course, we become distant from the sunnah of the Prophet. We lost our roots. We lost our teaching, right? So we turn to the Walid ibn Mughiras, right? And we forget the barakah of the blind man who became the most precious treasure to the Prophet, right? Abu Bakr recognized the barakah of Bilal, right? And later the Prophet was introduced to his barakah when he said, I saw your footsteps ahead of me in Jannah. It's not because he was Black, right? Blackness don't mean you're better than anybody else. But there's a barakah that Allah puts in disenfranchised, weak persons that he allows you to see when you humble yourself to help them, and then they uplift you as a result. When you work on people that have been victimized in the system, Allah works you. When you lift them up, Allah lifts you up. So that's the system of our deen, right? We got to elevate those that have been stepped on, and then they'll accept this deen, and then the malaika will help in the way that the angels came to the Muslims help at Badr. Numbers won't mean anything. Tanks won't mean it. Not that we want anything, right? Numbers won't mean anything. Allah Ta'ala will open up doors, right? We can barely get Muslims to open up doors for us now. Allah will open up doors for us, but we got to go to where the barakah is. That's the point.
Inshallah, Jazakumullah khair. We have Tawqir. Do you want to, I see your question, but you want to go ahead?
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh Khalil and Darren. Jazakumullah khair for the wonderful presentation. You kind of answered this in your last response, Sheikh, and Darren, specifically your point of view as well as a community member for years. Do you have any specific guidances or recommendations for the board or administration of a suburban masjid to facilitate ending racism within the community and at large? I mean, as Sheikh mentioned, Sheikh Abdur, we are putting together a team and a commission for anti-racism programming, but is there anything else more specific that you'd advise or recommend?
I'll just say, I think the advice that we got from the Sheikh is spot on. I don't think I have much to add to it. But what I will say is that the likelihood of these type of projects being successful is increased when the leadership makes it a priority, makes it a continuous priority, and holds the community accountable for achieving the goal. So that's just a fancy way of saying, like, when leadership is, you know, in place and is making this happen, the work can get done more efficiently. When it's not, it's like it can still be done, and there's lots of you know examples of work, you know, bubbling up from the ground up or the grassroots level up. But yeah, I think the board needs to when the board sets it as like a priority, a consistent priority, and you know is holding our community accountable for this stuff, that will make it way more likely to be a continuous success. And so what that also speaks to, and I know this is hard, is thinking, and I know we've been one of the things I definitely have seen progress in this regard in our community is thinking about who is actually on the board and who are we encouraging to join the board. And I mean encouraging, right? I know sometimes it's a process where we think, look, we just open it up to whoever and let the chips fall where they may. And what I was saying before is that often produces a scenario where we just reproduce the power dynamics, because the people who feel empowered to do that step up and the people who don't. And so it also requires some strategic thought around, thinking about different constituencies within our community by race, by gender, by immigration status, by language proficiency, by, a bunch of different things, right? And thinking about trying to constitute a board that that represents the interests of as many, constituencies in our community. And so that requires the board being, really intentional and strategic as we move into new cycles for, doing board elections, to be thinking and to be recruiting and going out of their way to inviting folks from more minoritized parts of our communities to be part of this. And I'll say that I feel very comfortable in this community, alhamdulillah, right, on the efforts. I'm not going to name these people because a lot of us know who these people are, and I'm not trying to embarrass them and try and take away from their good deeds, but there are brothers and sisters in our community who go out of their way and came to me and found me and welcomed me and talked to me and sat with me during those Friday dinners, right? And asked me, and when it was time for looking for volunteers for this initiative or that initiative, encouraged me, yes, come on, you have to, right? It was that affirmative work, right, that people did, that people who went out of their way to invite me into this process, right? that made me feel so comfortable in this community. And I think we need more of that writ large in our community, and even more so when it comes to thinking about leadership positions in our community.
Yeah, beautiful point. I think brilliant point. I think that, the board needs to invest in a not financially, but just practically in a diversity officer, on the board, somebody who can help make sure the decisions of the board, the message itself is always inclusive and open. Where there should always be diversity on the board, and then the way the board relates to the community should be based in diverse lenses, and also board members themselves have to be committed to yearly discourses, trainings, seminars, on race theory, on gender theory. I mean, all kinds of things. That all kinds of professional trainings that go on in companies and universities as well, to train and enhance leadership and the quality of leadership that can really move the leadership in a positive direction. And should be responsible for bringing new faces to the community also. If board members also have responsibility to bring new people and faces that don't look like them to the community just for a visit, and then they themselves are responsible to every year to visit one or two different masjids, just to see meet the community members there, and to sit side by side, eat with them. Those are things that go a long way, inshallah ta'ala.
I really like that last point, where to go out and meet other communities and sit with them and eat with them, mashallah. So we will close, inshallah, with that. There are a few more questions, but inshallah, it's already an hour and a half, but barakallah fikum, you took out your precious time from your family and from your busy work that you do. Both of you, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless both of you. May Allah put barakah in your time and your effort and your energy, and may Allah bless you and your family and your parents and all of those, your mentors and those who taught you, and those subhanallah that we are learning from you. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless our community and to bless all of our volunteers and helpers. أقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله. For those who are seeking to volunteer or help, inshallah, you can email to programs@icne.net. There are a few community members who have reached out, and they really want to help and participate and collaborate in doing activities regarding this same issue, inshallah. So please email at that address, inshallah. Hopefully that we can reach out and put something together. We're also putting together a workshop, hopefully that will happen. We're not opening up very soon for regular programs, so it will have to be virtual, just like our regular program that we're doing now. So that will be a virtual workshop that we're thinking of doing, inshallah, very soon. Also, one of the things that we thought about is to do khutbas on a regular basis throughout the year. So dedicating few khutbas on the same subject to talk about and to educate, and mashallah, hopefully our leadership can take that leadership and make sure to assure, as Khalil Abdur Rashid said, that is very important for our leadership to kind of ensure that this thing happens. Otherwise, these little initiatives kind of die off on their own. So barakallah fikum. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless our leadership, all of our volunteers and helpers in any way. So inshallah, we'll close with that. Subhanallah bihamdi, subhanallah al-azim, subhanakallah bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khair. Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Alaikum salam. Assalamu alaikum.